special. I'm calling the Monday, April 28th, public hearing on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 to order. Ms. Dorsey will not be attending tonight. So I am looking for an approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Ms. McKenzie's made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Rhodes, second. Is there any comment, questions? I call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All righty. Ms. Swanson, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me. All righty, Dr. McComas, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. I think Mr. Rapport is going to pull up our presentation from last, was it, I think just last week, perhaps? It's going so fast. So I'm going to just quickly go through and hit the highlights again, just to anchor our public comment today to what people are commenting on. So our budget cycle for FY26, our priorities, of course, are our students and our student needs. We know that we've been engaging our community extensively since the beginning of the year for multiple reasons, budget being one of which, and identifying our priorities. So we know our students with learning support needs are a priority, of course, math and literacy, and we know we are focusing on strengthening our middle school as well as our STEAM programs overall. Here's demographics of what our students who are receiving services are proportionally within our school system. And of course, our achievement, we know our investments in literacy are beginning to really show some improvements, particularly with the first cohort of students post-pandemic. And we see that impact as well in mathematics. So bottom line here, our revenue for next fiscal year is $30.9 million. We do highlight that there are some funds that come into the operating budget that are function as restricted, meaning they can only be used for those services. Concentration of poverty funds being one of them, and transitional supplemental instruction, that's to support early childhood. And these are blueprint funds that are, again, restricted in their use. We know right now the budget I'm proposing includes the reduction of 36 positions. With the reduction of 36 positions, our personnel cost would be $25.5 million, and our non-personnel cost would be $7.2 million for next year. That still, here you can see that breakdown, that still fundamentally leaves us in a deficit that we need to close. So income would be $30.9 million, expenses would be $32.7 million, and again, that's inclusive of 36 positions being reduced and slightly over $500,000 in non-personnel. So again, why are we in this situation? It's a combination of things. Fundamentally, over the last 5 years, our student enrollment has continued to decline. We've lost 224 students over the last 5 years. However, we have not reduced our personnel expenses in those 5 years because we had the benefit of emergency COVID relief funds, and we use those relief funds to provide stability for our school system, and those relief funds have now been exhausted. And so bottom line, we don't have supplemental funds to be able to maintain our recurring costs at the same level we were previously, and our revenue is down because our student enrollment is down. And paired with that, of course, we have the natural increase in the cost of doing business because the price of things go up, and inflation drives the cost of things up, as well as, you know, we have to stay competitive with our salaries and maintenance of our operations. We know, for example, we have an aging middle school facility that in and of itself, the maintenance demands of that are just increasing year upon year. Here you see on a snapshot how our enrollment has been declining, and again, if you look at the last 5 years, If we had not had emergency support funds, we would have innately been trimming our recurring costs, our personnel positions, a little year upon year. But because of those supplemental funds, we did not have to do that. And so now we are at the fiscal cliff from those, the declining enrollment, crossing the intersection with the sunset of relief funds. Just to make the point, to help everyone understand, had we not lost 224 students, at a minimum, our budget would be up 3.1 million. So again, each student brings with it the revenue to help cover the cost of educating themselves, and it sort of helps distribute the cost. You know, the more people that you have, the more, it's proportional, right? It's scale, thank you.
Economy of scale.
The economy of scale, thank you. We could do more with more, and with less, of course, it becomes more challenging and more expensive. Thank you. Here is just to reiterate to everyone, and this was a slide that was also in our January grant presentation, but here you can see all of the multiple COVID emergency relief grants that we received, the time period over which we had the funds, and the amount. Some of those were, built for very specific things. You see one identified as technology grant, one for reopening grant, one for summer school. And so you can see those monies were directed to support those resources. So how are we navigating it? First thing I did was zero-base the budget. So what I went through and I looked at everything in our budget and looked at what is the actual cost, right? So for example, instead of transportation is a good example. We had been allocating whatever set amount we had been providing the transportation, and we were allocating that amount year after year after year. What I did was I went back and said, how much does it actually cost us to run transportation? And then I averaged that out, knowing that some years things are a little more expensive and some years you can try to catch a break, so to speak. But I adjusted our budget to actually position money where we know we'll need it, as opposed to just allocating less than we know it will cost and then being frustrated when transportation goes above the cost, right? So let's put the money where we know it's needed. So that was part of the zero basing process to make sure that we're positioning the dollars that we have where we actually need them, and that the amount of allocation is based on data and evidence for the amount. Next, we looked at non-personnel expenses. Everything that was non-personnel, we looked at to see where we could trim, and I trimmed in lots of different areas, even though sometimes in a whole category, it still may not have reduced the whole category, but you can go in and see the subcategories and where I took the scalpel and trimmed, and we went through that multiple times to try to trim that down. And again, we looked at how we can economize operations. So how can we maximize the dollars that we have? And then ultimately, that led me to having to look at recurring costs, which our recurring costs primarily are our personnel. And so any vacancies that we currently have, we are not filling as part of our hiring freeze. And then retirement incentive. So we have offered a one-time incentive this year for our colleagues who are eligible to retire in the teachers union, and some, we're working through that process around offering that incentive. They are our highest paid instructional personnel, and so they are highly credentialed, highly experienced personnel, and their incomes reflect that. And so that's all the multiple strategies we've been using to try to navigate this budget. So again, here in this slide, you can see where I went in, and you can see reductions for non-personnel. Here you can see the total sort of budget layout, right? If the revenue is 30.9 million, we know personnel at a minimum right now would cost 25.5. We know non-personnel would be 7. That still leaves us a deficit of 1.8. We use $1 million or 99.6 from our fund balance right now that I know we can have to put towards it. That still leaves us with an $800,000 deficit, or the equivalent of approximately 8 more positions. either we can see if we can find additional support, or we will need to reduce the equivalent of 8 more positions to close the deficit. And why positions? Again, you can see here proportionally in another way how our recurring costs or our personnel costs are the things that really, there are, people are our greatest asset, but they're also our most costly asset. And again, how am I working to reduce the position? So we are actively in the process of, we have Mr. Hushin, who is representing us tonight at an athletic banquet. Otherwise, he would be with us. He has been meeting with everyone who's eligible for this retirement incentive. We have allowed people up until May 12th to make that decision. We have had people who are eligible already say, yes, you know what, I will take that incentive. We also have normal attrition, so things like the vacancies that I'm not filling. We also have, because of the concentration of poverty funds, 2 schools next year will be brand new to receiving those funds, so all 5 of our schools are eligible for concentration of poverty funds. The 2 schools that are new for next year are Kent County High School and Galena Elementary School. What's important to understand is the first year that a school is eligible for the COP funds, you get the personnel funds, so they'll call it the Concentration of Poverty Personnel Grant. And that is specific money to fund a community schools facilitator at that school. And their work that first year is to robustly engage the school community in a needs assessment process and to engage the community in developing a plan of how to use their community schools funds the following year, because the second year is when you get the per pupil allocation. And so the per pupil allocation are the things that help fund all the wraparound supports that are identified in the needs assessment. So I bring all that up to say we will have 2 community schools facilitator positions for next year, 1 for each of those schools. And we will post those because we have to do that with those funds. And that then creates the opportunity for some of our current employees who may be interested in that type of work to apply for. So if they apply for that and get that position, of course, that frees up a position on our operating budget. I use all that to explain that's all part of this attrition process. Ultimately, if we have to engage in the reduction in force protocol, we will do that. That process is in place for the different categories of employee, right? So we have our instructional personnel, we have our support personnel, and we would follow what's laid out in the master agreements and contracts depending upon what category of personnel are affected. And now, again, how does this affect teaching and learning? We know that at our secondary grades, grades 6 to 12, that a high percentage of our classrooms, 43% on average, have 15 or fewer students. That's truly a class size that is not typical in most school systems. Most school systems have class sizes of 25 to 30 students. Research says 18 to 22 is optimal class size. And so we do have room to tighten our belt here and still not compromise the educational experience of our students. And I know that that's difficult because we all want great class size, but we can tighten our belt here and it will be okay. And so improvements, I'm looking at reorganizing special ed facilitation. Currently, and we did get some budget questions about this, so I'll just take a moment here. Currently, our model, we have teacher specialists at our elementary schools, and they are, their job is to help with IEP facilitation and also help with instructional supports and serve as support as well for the principal, and kind of a right hand, if you will, for our elementary schools that have no assistant principal. Everyone, our principals, special education, we all agree that the current model that we have is not really, it's kind of like asking a person to do 2 jobs simultaneously. And so we are really going to be shifting the funding for the teacher specialists onto the operating operating funds, and then using special education funds to continue and reorganize the model that we have. And so I've been working with Dr. Keene and the principals around, if what we're currently doing is not working, what would work, right? And so we're looking at reorganizing how we support special ed facilitation. We have applied for Maryland State Department of Education's literacy grant. If we just submitted our application the other day, if we get that, and I have confidence that we will, our state superintendent is really a strong proponent of literacy, and she's gone out of her way to create these opportunities for school systems. So if we get that, that will afford us 3 literacy coaches that would be in schools every day, in classrooms, coaching around literacy instruction. And so we're hopeful that we get those.
So, just for clarification, when you say literacy coaches, are they coaching the teachers, or are they coaching the kids?
It would be a combination of both.
Okay.
Because they'll be going in to see how the instruction is going. You know, for example, we've invested a lot, for example, in Orton Gillingham. Are we continuing to implement that with Fidelity? And then what's the impact on our student, and what are small groups that need to be pooled? So increase efficiency systems, that's the example of economizing, and then increase concentration of poverty resources for wraparound supports. There's a great deal of evidence that where you have community schools, you do see bump ups in student achievement, because there's a lot of wraparound services that are provided to students and families.
Question before you move on.
Yes, sir.
Explain what you just said. It's not working with the current model.
So our current model, we have teacher specialists at each of our elementary schools. They are primarily funded through special education right now, but their job is twofold. It is to help facilitate our IEPs, meetings and case management and compliance. I hope I'm describing that properly, Dr. Keene, as well as to serve as that sort of right hand for the principals. What is happening is, you know, special education is so important, and we really need to make sure that we are paying attention to that and doing that well. That's really the bulk of where they are able to spend their time, and they're not able to then also help the principal with other instructional supports, other
So
administrative.
it's a spread too thin type of deal.
Exactly.
Understood.
Perfectly put.
One
Yes.
more.
Yep.
I'll let you go. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
How long has this been going on where,
Our current model.
yes, what point did we figure out it wasn't working? And then why are we addressing it now?
Well, I think, Dr. Keene, how many years have we in our current model? I have to ask for institutional background. I think several.
So
It
it started 6 years ago, and it hasn't been working for 6 years.
Well, I know it started 6 years ago for a very specific reason, using very specific funds. I think, as with anything, especially over time, you get job creep, right? Like, the more responsibilities come onto the plate. It came to my attention sincerely day one. My very first meeting, the first day on the job, I went around to meet with our principals at their schools. And it's clear our elementary principals are a team, because I went from Rock Hall to Garnett to Galena, and every single principal right out the gate, one of the first things they said to me was, "This is not working." And then, of course, I talked with Dr. Keene, and she agrees that we really have spread the position too thin, and so this is a priority for the way our schools function. The other thing I would add to this, if you'll allow me another moment here, is, you know, because our elementary schools do not have assistant principals, and I completely agree, we can't afford another administrator at elementary schools. We do, however, need to invest in building a pipeline of leadership. 2 of our 3 elementary principals could retire in the next 24 months. And we also have some other senior staff who will be reaching retirement eligibility and have indicated that they will anticipate retiring in the next 12 to 24 months. So we need to have that next bench of leaders ready to smoothly assume leadership at our elementary schools, because change will come. And if we are not preparing people to assume that, it creates turbulence at a school. And the one thing that's terrible for students and student achievement is turbulence in school leadership, right? When you change leaders, if that is not thoughtfully done, and the incoming leader isn't thoughtfully vetted, it is so disruptive. I think we saw some of that at our high school and middle school, right? It is so important to have smooth transition of leadership at schools for a ton of reasons, but it really does impact student achievement and teachers' ability to do their work well in a school. And so it's important for us to invest in that next level of leadership for our elementary school. So I'll get off my soapbox, but that's how passionate I feel about that.
Well, I got questions, because I feel
Yeah.
like this is pertinent information, especially with us discussing the budget. I'm new to the board, so a lot of the things we're hearing, I would say, are consequences or effects or outcomes prior to me being on this board.
Yes, mhm.
Now, I'm not saying you said what I'm about to say, so don't.
Okay.
So there has been no way to pass the baton in leadership in our elementary schools until now either? Because I'm hearing a lot of things that we're handling now, but I kind of foresee this could have been a problem for at least the last 10 years, maybe.
Well, here's my best answer, and I know, Mr. Rhodes, you were being patient for you had a comment, question as well, is what I would say is, this is a difficult thing, right? Because nobody ever wants to invest more in administration, right? No one says, yes, we need more administration. People are always like, we need less administration. But the truth is, you do need leadership, and you do need people ready. You need to grow and mentor people so that they're ready to take that next step, so that you maintain quality of service for our community. And so I think that that's probably been the crux of it, right? That we've been trying to solve a problem from a tangential angle, and I'm bringing forward with their, shifting the funding structure to say, we need to recognize that this is a legitimate need, and we need to invest in that. And if we choose not to, we are only creating turbulence down the road, because we will come to a point where some of our leaders will retire, and we will need people ready. And it's, recruiting people here is challenging for a number of reasons. And so it's best if we invest in our own people. And I would say, it seems to me, when I listen to people, we do best when we have our internal people grow. People want to work for organizations where they see growth opportunities. So I would offer all that. And do you mind if I go on and ask Mr. Rhodes? Do you mind, Ms. McGee? The teacher in me comes out.
I want to hear what Ms. Rhodes
I
has to
just
say.
have a quick question. First of all, this Orton Gillingham, I think is one of the best things we've done.
Agreed.
I don't know if people totally understand it, and it's probably hard to explain it in a few words, but I'm wondering, it's growing, and the new teachers really enjoy it. How long will this go? Will this continue up into the higher grades? I mean, we're doing it in the lower grades. Is it going to continue with the students? Because I think we have a lot of potential here. I mean,
Right. I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
go ahead, go
I'm
ahead.
excited. I agree with you, Mr. Rhodes. So we are continue to invest in Orton Gillingham. I am not doing anything to move us away from that. We do have people at the middle school and high school trained in Orton Gillingham. Now, unlike the elementary schools where all teachers are trained in Orton Gillingham, at the middle and high school, we have specialists trained, because it starts to become a more customized, less universal and more customized at those higher grade levels. But we do have that, and we're going to continue to provide that, and that's a huge investment for us.
Just one quick question. Is there an easy way to describe why Orton Gillingham is so much better than what we had in the past? I mean, it's phonics and all that, and it's sort of complicated, but could you describe it so people really sort of know what this is? Because I think it's one of the best things we're doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's so innovative. The Kent County Schools was so wise and truly innovative. I'll be honest, I selfishly can't wait for a couple years to see our literacy scores and math scores year upon year, because no one is doing in the public schools what we are doing. So Orton Gillingham is, they describe as explicit and systemic approach to teaching. So what does that mean? What it means is we really use multi-sensory approaches to teaching learning. So if you were in our classrooms, and I know our board members have been, you'll see teachers teaching like sounding out, right? And the students are following along because by accessing different sensory points as they're learning, it helps their brain acquire literacy in a way that works for more brain neurology than less. In the traditional way of teaching literacy, we really are not looking at multi-sensory approaches to teaching it. And we have historically, in most school systems, only reserve this methodology after students have demonstrated failure, unfortunately, right? And so what we did is we flipped that. We said, you know what, this is excellent methodology for all learners. And so all students will have this approach to learning literacy. And again, if you look at last year's third grade data in math and literacy, that's tremendous, a 20% gain in 24 months. I mean, that's huge, and so we are definitely keeping it. I don't know if that's helpful. It's easier to see it than to describe it, but no one is in the public school sector is using that universally. You will find non-public schools focused on serving students with dyslexia use it, right? But again, in the public sector, we're the only ones who are using it universally. I think it's I'm excited, proud, and I don't know that other school systems realize it, even though I talk about it, but I don't think
it's
they've
great
been.
we're leading in that. Let's just keep going.
Absolutely,
So.
absolutely. So thank you.
Can I ask a question
And after Trish,
to
I got
follow up on something Mr. Queen asked you? You talk about having a bench so that there
Yes.
isn't turbulence or chaos might be closer to
I know,
what
I
can
know.
happen.
It could be that.
And we experience that. So is it accurate to say that in a bigger picture, we're in a really challenging situation, which is, in a good way, forcing us to look at everything from the foundation up? So some of the things that may have been, I don't want to say overlooked, because that sounds like somebody wasn't doing their job in the past, but we're trying to address, I don't want to say everything, but since we're going to have to make some big changes, we might as well make the right big changes.
Right.
I mean, to put it in a sports analogy, I mean, because I've been a coach, that when you're winning, you can overlook the bad stuff, but once you start losing, then all of a sudden, everything else comes into sharper clarity. So I kind of feel like when you're talking about improvements, and Mr. Queen was asking you, well, how long has this been going on, and when did you know it, and what are we doing about it? I feel like that's kind of what you're doing.
Right. Everything, I think to your point, everything's on the table for consideration. And I would also offer this, Mr. Queen, I don't know what rose beyond the superintendent's level in the budget process in previous cycles, right?
Yeah.
So I'm bringing this forward because it was literally one of the first things 3 of our 5 principals said to me on day 1 of the job. So, and I know as having been a principal, what they need versus what they have, right? The truth is they need both. They need
gonna say,
support
yeah.
around special ed facilitation. Not only is that something we need for our children, our teachers, our families, but it's a requirement, right? Like we have to have excellent special ed services. And that's an area that we need growth in. So I would never say we need to do less. We need to do
Well, and
different.
How can you make someone choose? One over, if you have one person and their time is being demanded, they really need to be 2 people, and they end up having to choose, somebody's going to lose out on that.
Right, you're only one person, and I would say part of why, and this is where I know people will want to say, well, do the principals really need that support? Yes, the principals really need that support. As someone who has led an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school administrator, I will tell you at any given moment in a school as a principal, you may be planned to go observe a classroom instruction and that teacher is expecting you to come. A child has a bad moment and needs disciplinary attention, and you have an angry parent who's walking through the door because of something that happened that you're not even aware of yet, and you have an IEP meeting going on, and lunch shift is starting in 10 minutes. So all of those things can be happening simultaneously, and our principals, as excellent as they are, and I will tell you, our elementary principals are impressive leaders. They are leaders who know what's happening in their building, they work hard, they are experienced, they make decisions in the right interest of kids. With all of that experience and expertise, they still are one person and can only but do so much at one time. And so they do need support, right? Because you can't say to the angry parent, just have a seat, I'll be back when I'm done lunch duty, or the IEP meeting, or, oh, this teacher by contract I need to observe and get them feedback within a certain amount of time. So it's reasonable that they need support. We cannot afford a full AP administrator, I agree. But what we can do is provide teacher leadership so that we are supporting our principals, which hopefully they won't retire, they'll last longer, and preparing that next generation of leader for Kent County Schools. So that's, I just offer that, Mr. Queen. I don't know if it's been brought before the board the way I'm bringing it, in all fairness as well.
Right. One, and then
go
I-
ahead, sorry.
Question
No, go
about, with the initial positions that the concentration of poverty grant provides, my understanding is that while those 2 positions have to be hired, they don't necessarily have to use all of those funds, that any excess can be used for wraparound services. Is that still correct?
Sure, anything, so exactly, and so for example, if we, what do you call it? Hire somebody, again, if you have an experienced person, they tend to be more costly in terms of expense. If we have a less experienced person, it could be less. So yes, certainly no funds are to go to waste. The other thing is they gave us increased flexibility this year. Not just Kent County, but all schools in the legislative process, is that you are able to use a certain portion of concentration and poverty funds to support central administration as well. What they found at the state level, and the state had less than a handful of people at the state helping to supervise all of these funds across the state. I think there's 750 community schools, and the funding that goes with all of them. And school systems, now we're fortunate because we are small, right? So we have 5, but some school systems have lots and lots and lots of community schools, hundreds, and so they have allowed school systems to take, so Ms. Jacomowitz, for example, is our central leader who helps support the community schools process, because there's reporting and accountability pieces and coordination that goes on, and so she's our central person who helps support that. I'm looking at seeing if I could use a portion of the community schools fund to help supplement her budgetary cost, like the cost of her position. I wouldn't take it away from the schools to cause detriment. And so that's something with the central positions, I'm looking at all of our grant funds to see how can I reduce our central cost and think about using our grant funds as wisely as we can.
So, do you think any of it would go to the wraparound services that?
I have to look at, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number in front of me for Galena and for the high school, but I have to look at exactly what that number is. I've been looking at the whole number on the chart that shows the amount for all 5 schools, so I have to look at the breakout.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful just to have an understanding, just because we are new to it, to be able to know, like, if there was an excess, how was that applied in the past? And
Yes.
what would be the intent to use? I understand the central office, but
Yeah.
I guess I would probably like more understanding about what that means.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, so it sounds like one of the future presentations, aside from the budget process, but as an outgrowth, is really a presentation on our community schools. And I think that that's wise for all of you as well as for our community, because there are some great things happening with our community schools. Let me just write that note down for myself.
And while you're doing,
Yes. Okay. Can you, just for the microphone, if you can so that way I won't recap. Thank you. Thank you. This is why I need Ms. Stewart. She has the breakdown for me.
In total, it's the $1,851,554. Garnett, the personnel grant that they are going to get is the $280,212, and that is the personal grant that each school is actually going to get in equal amounts. The other schools that are per pupil, Garnett gets a per pupil amount of $186,838. Rock Hall is going to get $149,569, and the middle school is going to get $114,087. So they do use that funding for wraparound. We first use it for the personnel. We use it primarily for our nursing. That's why you'll see the savings in student health, because all the nursing costs are shifted to personnel and whoever the community specialist is. Once we absorb those costs, then the remaining cost goes to either supplies, wraparound services. It really tailors to the needs assessment of the school. Some of the things, like, for example, Rock Hall does a community
Farmers market?
Yes, and that concentration of poverty is used for a lot of those things. Some of those things that are for community engagement, concentration of poverty funds are used for that. So hopefully that will answer.
Question, I mean, I know we know, but for the people watching who might not know, Dr. McComas, can you explain what wraparound services are?
Yes, so wraparound services it's inclusive of a lot of different possibilities. So for example, Ms. Stewart talked about our school nurses are funded using our concentration of poverty funds. Our school nurses, of course, are there during the day for student health needs, and we have many students with a lot of medical needs, so I know at Rock Hall, for example, we have some medically fragile students who have feeding tubes and things of that nature that really need constant attention. They also, I know at the middle school, we have some students with seizures that are very critical condition, and of course, student medical needs ebb and flow over the years at all grade levels, and so that can be hard to predict. So that's one example. Other services, as Ms. Stewart, Rock Hall identified the ability to have fresh vegetables and resources to fresh foods that led to their school community identifying that as a need, and then running the farmers market to provide access to foods. That's an example. It could also be tutoring services for students after school hours. It can be sometimes therapeutic services for students. It can also, I've seen, not here in Kent County, but I've seen in other school systems, funds have been used to have social workers available to provide therapeutic supports for students after school, and for therapeutic supports in the family, in the home. Because the idea of the community schools is when you're not just caring for the student, but you're also providing supports to their families. I've seen some community schools where they actually provided GED services for parents who needed to complete their GED to try to then get a job. So it's broader than just student need, it's really school community need, but the idea is you want to support a child, you also sometimes need to support the parents, the family, and the whole community. Could be coats in the wintertime, sorry, I want to roll now.
So, back on the concentration of poverty grant, so the high school in Galena, which are going to be the new recipients this year, and you said the first year the money's used primarily for a needs assessment. Is there a guarantee that there is a second year, that they're going to, there's like personnel and then there's something else?
Per pupil funding. So I can explain the change in the legislation, which is I think what your real question is, right?
Because I feel like a couple years ago, Garnett didn't get that second thing, right? Yeah, okay.
The
Yeah.
per pupil allocation, right?
Yeah, so, yeah.
So, right, and the funding comes from the state of Maryland, and while I can't anticipate what the state will do next year in a legislation, legislative
So
process.
there's no guarantee that they're, that.
Well, right
okay.
now it is,
Okay.
but, things,
I gotcha.
lots of
Okay.
unforeseens emerge.
Okay.
But right now, what the change that they made is, in the original blueprint legislation,
Yeah, this was pre-blueprint when this went down, so to speak. Okay. Yeah.
okay, thanks, that's helpful for me to know. In the original blueprint funding model, and I'm making these numbers up just to easy demonstration. Say I'm a school and my per pupil funding in year one was $100 a student. Then year two, it might be $125 a student. In year three, $150. So it was supposed to incrementally increase year upon year. What they did for, in this year's.
And why is that? Because things cost more? I mean, or is it because more services were identified that were needed?
I'm not sure what their original theory
Okay.
was. I suspect it's just this idea of in continuing to invest in wraparound services, because
Okay.
there is a significant evidence across the nation of where you have community schools, students do better, I think, because more of their needs outside of just academic instruction are being supported. But what the legislation did this year is it's freezing that, it's not just increasing incrementally year upon year. They're kind of freezing the amount for a certain number of years. And I don't remember the number of years that they're holding it constant, but that was the change this year in legislation. So,
I guess what I'm asking, and I'm probably getting way down in the weeds, which is making this longer than it needs to be, and I apologize. I guess what I'm asking is, if the first year for the two new recipients is primarily a needs assessment, can they be guaranteed that now that they've got this data of what they need, that they're going to have money to address those needs?
right now, that's what the state is saying.
Okay,
We should be able to
okay.
count on that per pupil. Again, would be for the FY '27, and so right now, that is the understanding.
Okay.
We shall see what next year's legislative cycle might bring, because, everyone, the negotiating the implementation of the blueprint is definitely a conversation in Kent County. It's a conversation in the legislature. We see that in the news. So I just offer that as a,
Until they tell us otherwise,
That's
that's the
right,
plan. I
that's
got
right.
you,
Mhm.
okay.
I know we haven't yet gotten to public comment. Do we want to hear public comment, and then we can pick up our discussion? I'm happy to discuss the budget till the cows come home.
I was about to say, are you finished with what you wanted to discuss first?
I believe so. Sorry, I forgot. I think that just the walkaway points. We are right sizing because of declining enrollment. Relief funds are gone, and of course, the cost of doing business does not actually go down. And so here we are in our budget hearing. Just for the sake of everyone's knowledge, and I'll try to remember to reiterate this at the end, we have the hearing tonight. In the board format, we don't comment on public, we don't respond in a dialogue fashion to public comment. But to support people's understanding, this Thursday, I will have the superintendent's budget town hall meeting. You can come in person here to the board room, and we also have a virtual link. If you want to participate virtually, you do need to go in and register, so we can send you a secure link to make sure that the virtual aspect of the meeting is well managed. I'm happy. My purpose of conducting that superintendent's town hall meeting is to be able to actually answer your questions and respond to your wonderings, and to make sure that people have as a full understanding of our budget as possible. We do have an email link that you can submit budget questions. We posted that at our meeting, our last meeting. To date, we've received 3 submissions of budget questions, really 4 overall, through email, 3 through the community-wide link. Those budget questions have been consolidated into one full document. I have my printed copy here. This is available on our website, so that the community can see what questions have been posed and what the responses are to those questions. Any questions that we get this evening and questions that I receive on Thursday at the budget town hall meeting, I will likewise consolidate and post those questions and those responses for everyone. because if one person is asking it, other people are thinking about it, but just haven't stood still long enough to write it down. And so my goal is to exhaust people's wonderings and questions, and then we will be back next week, I think it is already.
A week from today.
A week from today with any amendments to a budget for hopefully final consideration, because,
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Just about format or protocol for the town hall? So this is your town hall, and we won't be here, correct?
Correct.
So what role do you see the board playing in your town hall?
yes. So to me, what I would ask our board members to do is listen. You can
Okay.
watch the town hall so that you are hearing. Again, to me, it's really an opportunity for us as a body to hear and consider what our community is trying to say to us, right? And we know at the end of the day, we have a difficult job. We have to right-size our budget to match our enrollment, and there aren't easy decisions in that process. And so we are listening tonight and on Thursday for insights and things to consider in this process. So that's what I just asked. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify. And it's important that it's a superintendent's forum so that, because the board isn't making any decisions yet on the budget, it's really offering that to be able to respond in real time to questions and to make sure that no stone has gone unturned in terms of having the opportunity for a community to have voice in this process. And I am big listening ears are open.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
So I know, Lat, you had told us when we met 2 weeks ago, I guess, that you were going, that the commissioners had asked you to come and speak to them, and I know you went last Tuesday. Mr. Rhodes and I went
Yes.
and sat and listened, and you're asking for an additional $800,000, and if we don't get that, that's 8 more positions.
Yes.
So we haven't heard from them, and I'm assuming may not hear until the day, May 6th, after we voted on May 5th. So, and let's say we don't get any additional money, will the $800,000 that you need to reduce, is that going to come strictly from personnel? I'm just trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Right, it would primarily come from personnel because that
Okay.
is really the bulk of our recurring cost.
And because non-personnel, we kind of,
Right, I have really looked at non-personnel. Now, our funding partners would like us to use contingency funds. And I can bring forward, if you go back and look at our audit reports. Ms. Stewart, what month was our audit report? Was that November? November or December, we had our audit reports.
It was delayed a month, yeah.
Yeah, so I think if you look on probably both of those months, you'll see the audit documents posted, and we'll see, and I don't have the page number on the audit report, but you'll see that we have funds listed as contingency, and of course, we have unassigned fund balance. And
And they're not the same thing, right?
they're not the same thing, and I don't know if, Ms. Stewart, if there's anything
Want
you
to
want to
clarify
add to
that for
that?
us? Because
Yeah.
I know that generally, people will use fund balance, rainy day fund, and contingency as if they're synonyms for the same thing, and they really aren't,
Right.
right? Can
Correct.
you educate us on the differences?
yes,
Sure.
please.
So in the financial statements, you'll see a category, like it'll say fund balance, but then there's a category that says committed. Under committed, there is budget reserve and contingency. So the budget reserve is the fund balance that we're using for the current budget year. So if you're looking at those financial statements, I think it was 1.7 million we were using for fiscal year 2024. And then there's a contingency, which is the 500,000 that is pertaining to our budget, our fund balance policy, which is that set aside essentially by the board. And then as you go to the bottom, there's an unassigned fund balance that pretty much is net of those two things that are taken as a whole. So when you're looking at fund balance, you do have to look at it as a whole, back out that budget reserve and whatever is committed, and then what is unassigned, which is necessarily nothing attached to that, that's the savings that we had for that year. That's what we tend to use as our fund balance going forward to balance our budget for the fiscal year.
But-
And it's always a delay, because we don't really know that true number until we finish ironing everything out for the financial statements.
But Dr. McComas,
Yes.
when we were at that meeting, I got the impression that the county commissioners wanted us to spend down that $500,000.
They do.
Now, Mrs. McGee made a good point, that they might not be in that same position in 3 years, and if we spend that money, I mean, I'd like to save it, but they want us to spend it down. They say they'll always be there to help us, and I agree, they probably would, but it'd be nice to have a little cushion sitting there.
Sure, and I will say, you know, I know Mr. Fithian, you know, made a point of talking about the contingency and all of that. Here's what I said there, and I believe is the case in my own experience in other school systems. When I worked in a school system that experienced a catastrophic cyber attack, and the entire school system was literally brought to a standstill. We could not, people, like, paychecks were due, and we couldn't even access who our employees were and things like that, because it was our county government that stepped in and helped us work through that process. And so I have that experience. I shared that Mr. Fithian that I have been in a situation where the school system needed the county government in a crisis moment to move forward. Hopefully, we will never be in a situation here in Kent County, but the unforeseen is the unforeseen, right? That's why you have contingency, because you don't know what is around the bend. We didn't know that the middle school sewer situation would act up this year, and we would have to close schools for 3 days for kids. So I said I certainly would consider it. I alone don't have that authority because our policy has us having 500,000. And Ms. Stewart, just to make sure I'm correct, that 500,000 is in the unassigned,
Contingency.
the contingency. Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, that's our policy. So I don't have the authority to go over our policy. That's board establishes policy.
Yeah.
So that's something for us to consider. You know, here's the other thing, and I point this out, although I think my words got a little jumbled in the moment. You know, what we know is contingency funds really function as one-time funds,
Yes.
right? They're not recurring costs like salaries. And so if you use them, you really are only temporarily Band-Aiding the budget, because
You
next year.
can't balance your budget because they're recurring costs on, I mean, you can't count on your fund balance to bail you out every year.
Right.
Because that money doesn't last very long.
And it's the
Right.
reason it's a $500,000 limit on that. Question, Dr. McCombs. You're asking for 800,000 more, which essentially is 8 positions. So we're not going to assume anything, but let's just assume we did not get it. And let's say we did take out 500,000. That's just 5 positions, correct?
Right, and for 1 year.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is when it's one-time funds, that, you know, it's not recurring, but our cost is recurring. So it'd be one thing if you say, you know, I'm going to use my contingency funds because, I don't know, a storm came through, and I had this happen at a Parkville Middle School. A storm came through, the gymnasium roof got destroyed. And so you need money one time to get that fixed. Now, of course, you have insurance and things like that, but that's the idea of like one-time funds versus we know we're going to fund, you know,
Those
a
positions
teacher
every year.
X
after
amount of
year
dollars,
after
yes,
year
we
after
use,
year. And
yeah.
that those positions, not only do we need to fund them year after year, but there's inflationary costs associated with health benefits go up every year, retirement contribution, salary increases. So it's really, you know, I certainly understand wanting to make use of all our funds, right? And to me, our budget deficit is serious. I mean, 43 positions is 11.7% of our entire workforce. This is a serious situation. This isn't like, oh, you've got to trim a little bit. This is a cliff. And to me, what are we willing to do to resolve it?
When you say we, you mean us and our community partners, correct?
Right, I mean, we collectively, we
Yes.
as a school system, I mean, we as a whole, and, you know, my effort here, and I think it's obvious to everyone, my effort is to have a positive working relationship with our funding partners, to be responsible on our end, and ultimately get us to a size that is about sustainability. You know, we are anticipating future student enrollment decline if the
Yes.
state projections hold accurate. Now, they are projections, things happen that are unforeseen, and we're not projected to increase enrollment for a number of years. I do absolutely believe that a new middle school facility will help our enrollment increase. Everywhere I've served in other school systems, when you have a new building, it's amazing how enrollment increases. Suddenly people find addresses, you know, like they figure out how to move into where that new school facility is located because they want their child to be in a state-of-the-art school. So I believe, to me, you know, we've got to shrink our footprint in terms of recurring costs, and we still need to make sure that we're bringing forward a new middle school building, which, while capital budget is different than operating budget, these are important strategies ultimately to address a budget that's sustainable over time.
That's what I was that was the word I was looking for. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot, that we're going to have to make really difficult decisions, even if we get a more favorable outcome than we're anticipating. You know, I mean, 36 people are not going to retire,
Right,
okay?
right.
And if we don't, and as you said, 8 additional, if we ended up with 44, that's the equivalent of an entire school. So I feel like we're kind of ripping off the Band-Aid, but I'm hopeful, I mean, and you keep using the word right-sizing, a budget that is the proper budget for a school system our size, not more money, I don't want to say than we need, because we always need more money, but, you know, we've been providing services that we relied on 15 million of emergency funds. So I'm hopeful that the really hard work that you're doing and Ms. Stewart's doing, and ultimately the hard decisions you're going to ask us to make, are going to put us in a more sustainable position going forward. I mean, I would hate to think that next year we're having the same conversation.
I agree. I mean, and that's part of why when I think about how to resolve that $800,000, with the understanding that enrollment is still projected to decline, we run the risk of being in the same conversation next year, which I don't think that's productive for us as a community. I will tell you
Well,
what
and I don't think that we can continue to offer the kind of retirement incentive we're
No,
offering
right,
this
that's
year.
really like a one-time
Yeah.
this year.
And even though it's not productive, like, this is a bigger spider web of issues than just the county, not the public school systems. A new middle school might show increase in some places, but in this rural area, we're gonna need some more housing. So we don't even have the housing or the jobs to attract people to a new middle school. So when we say, hey, a new middle school, which we haven't got, by the way, will attract these people, some people, such as John Queen, look at this like, what about economics and jobs? What about affordable housing? What about health care? Those are the things that people like to see around the school systems, which we don't have in place in this county. And I know it's a bleak conversation to have, but maybe the truth is going to hurt a lot of us. It's just, it is what it is. This year is 800,000, but if we're looking at the blueprint, and even now Mr. Walls has said this a couple of times, it jumps to 1.4, then 1.7, then 1.9. I still haven't heard a sustainable, and maybe because some of the numbers, we got to wait a little longer, we're trying to figure it out. I still haven't heard a sustainable plan to go at least 4 years down the line, because blueprint is going to affect so much of what we're doing. If we're trying to ask the county commissioners for 800,000 right now, what's going to be the answer when we go for 1.9 in maybe 2 years? It doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem logical.
I think the answer is the blueprint needs to be put on hold for a while. There's just no way it's sustainable. A lot of the counties are running out of money. It's just not going to work. I'd like to see it happen, but it was done with no funding. They have no money for it. So we got to force our county commissioners and our taxpayers to come up with the money to pay for this, and I don't think that's fair. I don't think it is. There's no money to start. So what do they think? We're just going to we're losing money and then we're going to spend more money in the blueprint? And I know that Mr. Porter's in charge of this blueprint, but it's just going to eat us alive, in my opinion now.
Sure. And here's what I would say is, I think it's important for us to keep our eye on what we have control of, right?
Locally,
We
yeah.
cannot control what the state legislature does. We can advocate, just as we advocate for funding for a middle school building, and we'll continue to advocate. I know I advocate as part of the superintendents across the state in terms of making recommendations for the legislature to consider related to blueprints. So I just offer for us to kind of maintain focus on what we actually have agency and control of, right? Because we cannot control the legislature. We recognize that as, in terms of county funding, we are part of a larger whole, right? The school system is part of the entire county, and that there's many things that many services that our county provides, and we are part of that. And so, as everyone's acknowledging, we have difficult decisions to make. So really, our question will boil down to our $800,000 deficit. What are we willing to do to close that? Are we willing to eliminate 8 more positions? Are we willing to use contingency funds, which then, affects our, are we willing to adjust our policy or revisit our policy to use those contingency funds, knowing that that's really a one-time solution and not an ongoing solution to an ongoing problem? So they're sort of big rocks that I'm going to ask the board to consider. I will bring forward a final proposed budget a week from tonight, but I do want to hear what our public has to say tonight. I look forward to hearing what discussions are had on Thursday, and then I'll finalize a proposal. But that's our question is, the things that are within our control, what is it we're willing to do to close that $800,000? I could have initially just brought forward a budget of reducing 43 positions and been done with that, in addition to the non-personnel. But I think there's a reason there's a process here, right? Because it's a community process.
Yeah.
And if at the end of the day, we decide the most effective long-term strategy to address this is to reduce the equivalent of 43, 44 positions, depending upon the value of each position. So instructional personnel are more costly. We may have, custodial, cafeteria, other personnel, IAs that they cost less, so you might need 2 or 3 to equal a higher paid salary. So that's really, our question is, what are we willing to do without to address the ongoing cost?
Our choice is you just summed it up, really. We don't have a lot of wiggle room to make those decisions. Some follow-up questions to the overall question, unless you want to go to public comment, because this board discussion after anyways.
Right. Well, I would offer, I'm assuming Mr. Wall is probably here to speak. I don't know if anybody else is. I just don't, I think as a courtesy, we probably should do a public hearing, because we're going to discuss it until we finalize things.
Yeah, and then one clarity, Tom Porter is not in charge of the blueprint, he's in charge
He's
of our
implementation.
implementation
Yeah.
of Kent County Public Schools.
Yes.
So I have a question. Are we going to be going through this whole budget and trying to get rid of some things, or are we just talking about elimination of positions? Because I'm just looking at certain things, like you got the bus department. They want an extra $144,000 for bus drivers and bus driver subs. That's a lot of money. Do they need that, or?
Well, here's the thing, it's actually not extra money. This is part of right sizing. Remember I said I went through and looked at what we actually spend?
I know you did.
This reflects what we actually spend. So while this appears as if it's new money, what I'm actually doing is putting money where we know we actually spend it, right? So it's kind of like,
Putting the money where it's needed.
correct,
I'm looking at.
So you've cut this, you've already gone through this and
I
cut it
have.
to the bone, everything is,
yes.
so you're just down to positions now? Okay.
Yeah. And again, I cut, Mr. Rhodes, just to, could you put the slide back up there? Thank you. Just to show you where you can go in and see some of the non-people things that I went through, because I truly went through every category, every request. Because the truth is, the very last thing I want to do is eliminate people's jobs. But there really
But
is.
it's reality now, and I mean,
Here is, Mr. Rhodes, and for anybody in the community who's also listening, if you look at where can I see reductions that are not people, right, not personnel, you can go through and look at these different categories, and you'll see reductions. Anywhere in the budget book you see the parentheses is a reduction in that line item. In some of the overall categories, the bottom line will show a reduction. In some of the categories, you won't see a reduction in the bottom line, but if you look up above, you'll see where I trimmed in some of the subcategories. And so that's where you can see those things, Mr. Rhodes. So I appreciate the question so that everyone knows. It's, I did not just accept the budget as we've previously organized it. I went through, scrutinized everything, aligned funds. In most instances where you see an increase, the increase is a function of one or two things. Either one, I'm actually placing money where we have demonstrated that it's needed, or we've taken into account some like inflationary costs, so like we know electricity, for example, is going to go up. Utilities is one that we broke out. Another area, one of the budget questions that was asked was about students who, it looks like it's new, like a new expense, but really what I'm doing is specifying money because we spend that money anyway. Students, for example, who have home and hospital teaching, if they're special education students, we're able to use special education funds to help support that. If you are a non-special ed student and you have, God forbid you come down with cancer or some other serious illness and you need home hospital support, we of course are going to cover the cost of that. I'm designating funds for that. It's like an additional $15,000. We'd be paying that anyway. I'm specifying it in the budget, so that might look like that's new or added, but really what I'm doing is designating funds for that purpose so that it's more transparent for everyone. There's quite a number of things like that where I've realigned things matched to our needs and actual spend, just to support increased transparency and accountability, and it will help me monitor things more closely throughout the year next year. So transportation is a good one. Ms. Stewart and I and Mr. Wheeler have lots of conversations all the time about transportation, because what I discovered is we were allocating the same amount year after year, but the cost has been going up. Gas goes up, maintenance, vehicles break down, they need repairs. And then I said, well, why aren't we putting the money in place, because we know that we're going to have that expense. And so that's what we did. And
Isn't that what you mean by zero basing the budget?
It is. So with zero basing, what you do is you go in and you look at what is it you're actually spending. And you don't just look at 1 year, you look at several years, because you can always have a fluke year. Like I think this year with our middle school, it was kind of a fluke year with the sewer type of thing. So that's you can see the anomalies stand out. So you look at what is a general amount that you actually need every year, and of course you budget for that, and you have to increase it a little bit because of inflation. And so instead of budgeting, it's like you think about I think about personal finance, right? Like if you're going to need, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, $2,000 to maintain your vehicle, oil changes, tires, transmission, whatever, air filters, whatever it is, you're going to need a certain amount to keep that working. So then you've got to plan for that. So that's what I've tried to do. And so that's typically where you see anything that looks like it's an increase, it's either because I'm actually putting it where we have demonstrated we need the money to be, and/or I'm accommodating for just the increased cost of doing business.
Were there a lot of line items that was given the same amount over time, and then you had to increase a few more items, like electricity, transportation?
Yeah, sincerely, you need to look through the draft budget book, and that's where you can see, you'll see what was last year's approved budget, what I'm requesting in our FY '26, and then in the third column, you will see if it's an increase or a decrease. Again, the decrease is noted by parentheses, and so that's where you can look across. So for example, right now, just coincidentally, I opened up the page 11, Category 2, Mid-Level Administration, which is really school-based administration. If you just look subscriptions and dues, and this covers the cost of professional publications and memberships to professional organizations. We had last year $6,060 in there. This year, I'm only allocating $500 in there, right? So that's an example of when I look at what we have, what we use, and are the monies where they need to be, and where can I, do with less, and to move to where we need to do more. So that's an example of a reduction, mileage and travel, yeah, I appreciate.
I wanted the example for the people watching.
Sure, right, and that, I
So
thought so.
just to the point of clarity, it's a public hearing, and we can ask you a bunch of questions afterwards, but I feel like we need to
Right, have
be polite
courtesy.
and have the public get an opportunity.
I agree, thank you.
Ms. Manley, was there just one from Mr. Wall, I think?
Mr. Wall, I think we need to make you an honorary board member.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you. It's, I'm just going to remind you, you're the only person today, so I feel like I can, how about I give you 5 minutes?
Yeah.
It's either or, I'm okay with 3 minutes.
Yeah,
I'm
because
okay.
we won't respond to you, so, okay.
And hopefully you have other people that are listening in.
Yeah.
That need to ask questions.
So I'm going to,
John,
I'm
this is
just,
what you need to go through.
Yes.
Exactly what Superintendent McComas just said. You need to go through this on a line item basis. So when she was talking about page 11. I
I'm
happen to
starting
be
you
on
now,
page
sir.
11.
I'm starting you now. All righty, there you go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So while she talks about, and I'm going to tell you, she did an excellent job on a line item basis. From a P&L guy in business, you did an excellent job. This is a tough deal.
I would agree.
But when I take a look at communication, and if there's a $31,500 increase, I have to ask, why are we almost doubling? So you need to go through the line items. What is staggering is the cost of insurance. Insurance for this school system is costing you $1 million more than it did last year. And there's no way around that, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I presume that even though you're going through MABE, that MABE is getting the best deal. You would hope. If they're not, you need to go out and get some competitive quotes, because $1 million is a lot of money on insurance. That was, it's a staggering amount. I forget what page it is on here, and
Be
I'm
under-
going to be running out of time.
Is it fixed
But I
term?
would suggest that you go through this on a line item basis and take a look at it. Superintendent McComas has done a great job. How you're going to make up $800,000, you can nickel and dime this thing to death, all right? Maybe you can come up with $100,000. If I really got into the nitty-gritty of this thing, I might come up with $200,000. But what am I taking away from something else? Because she's trying to right-size everything, and I agree with what's going on here. But you need to take a look at this, because what she has done is exemplary in trying to reduce cost. There are some costs that you didn't have in fiscal year '25, but you've got them in fiscal year '26. I presume that we had expenses, and so now what we're doing is covering expenses by you putting a dollar amount for fiscal year '26. Presumption on my part. Take a look at this thing. You've got a very narrow road to drive down. But go through this, all 43 pages like I did, and see what she's done. She's done an excellent job here. You guys have got a hell of a program. You got a hell of a problem. And while you're trying to fix this year, as you brought up, Superintendent McComas and I talked about this at your last meeting. It goes up exponentially after 2030. So yeah, this is a tough road. You've got very little to play with, you know? That's it. And I agree with Frank. Using that $500,000 now is not a good idea. I respect Commissioner Fithian, but then you have to, as he said, then you come to me with your requests. I wouldn't want to do that. No disrespect, Ron, if you're listening, but that's not a good idea. You need to have that little $500,000 slush fund over here, just in case. You know, if the commissioners can't fund it, they can't fund it, you gotta cut 8 positions. I feel bad. I was laid off once myself, totally understand the deal. You gotta narrow when, take a look at this. She's done an overview. The overview is great. You wanna get into the nitty-gritty? Go through all 43 pages of this, and you'll see what a great job she's done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll just add, if I may, for the sake of everyone, again, we did have 4 submissions of budget questions. For example, just the example that we just heard about related to communications and why is there a significant increase. That was one of the questions that was raised twice in the emails. And so in the published responses to that, and they did just get published this afternoon before the board meeting because I was working right up until I think 3 o'clock on them, you'll see the explanation for that. So I just would encourage everyone to go and look at those budget questions as you work through our draft budget book. To help explain. Again, you'll see largely where there is an increase, it's either because I'm actually calling it out and dedicating funds to an expense that we had that was just sort of buried in other expenses. As the communications is the example, that's really printers. At the cost of school printers, all of that was lumped together before, and I pulled it out so you can see how much do we spend on printing at our buildings, or an increase of the cost of doing business. So,
Before any, because we've all had a chance, just, I wondered if I could just give Alden an opportunity as a student. You know, you're a junior, so you've got another year in school. You're going to be on the receiving end of some changes we make. I really would like to hear a student's perspective.
I've been thinking, I don't know. I've been thinking about the personnel reductions specifically, and it's made me sad because I know that reducing the highest paid teachers is reducing the most experienced teachers and the ones with the most certification and all of that good stuff. And I know particular teachers that I'm pretty sure are going to get laid off, and that's really sad for me. And I know that I'm a little bit worried about like some of the CTE stuff because decreasing staff for those isn't really possible. And I'm a little bit worried about having to remove some of those programs because they cost a lot of money. And I know they're blueprint mandated, but or supposed to be there, but I just don't want these things to take away from what we already have. And I know that our class sizes will be increasing and that the upper levels will be hit harder than the elementary school levels, which is also not great. I just don't really know how to picture any of this, and I'm worried about how it'll turn out. And I think a lot of people aren't going to see it coming, and when next year comes, students are going to be like, what's going on? And people in the community might be like, what's going on? Because I know we've tried to communicate, but I just think we're not hearing it now as much, but I think people are aware of it, and it's really going to hit. And I'm worried about that. and I'm worried about how that'll affect me. And honestly, it's not gonna affect me much, it's my senior year.
You got
and-
3 younger siblings.
But
so-
I've got 3 younger siblings, and I'll say this about the blueprint. I know that it's hard and it costs money and it's a lot and it seems like it's creating more problems than it's solving. But as a student and as someone who's thinking about her younger brothers and future students, I'm glad that Maryland has created something that's a radical shift in trying to go in the right direction, because like our education system across the entire country is struggling a lot. And I think that even though we're hurting now, it's only been a few years into this implementation. And I hope that that the career education, I'm sort of going off on a tangent, but
No,
That's
go
okay,
ahead.
it's your opportunity.
that the opportunities that it's creating and the better environments it's creating for teacher salaries, and like, I think that it's going to have positive benefits, but I think it's gonna take a little while, especially with all the uncertainty going on right now economically, to see that. But I offer that as a student perspective for anyone who's questioning the blueprint, because change is tough, and, but I think sometimes when you have a system that's as broken as our education system seems to be sometimes, you need to do something big, and you have to suffer a little bit through it. And I'm sorry that that's happening now, and that it'll probably be happening for a little while, but I just hope that it'll end up being positive.
Be worth it. The struggle will yield a better outcome in the long run. I just want to thank you for your comment.
Yeah, well said, Alden.
Sincerely, and I just, hopefully I can offer you a little bit of comfort. I was looking today at our CTE programs, just to clarify for the community, for everyone's knowledge. 3 of our CTE programs have
In
caps.
case somebody doesn't know what
Oh,
CTE is.
Thank you, Ray. Career and technical education programs. For those of us used to, might have referred to them as vocational programs or VOTEC programs once at a time. But career and technical education programs, they are programs that, in most instances, at the end of the program of study, the students walk away with a professional credential that they can go right out into the workforce. In most cases. So I wanted to get back to just offer to you, I too am trying my very best to minimize impact on student program and student experience, right? To the extent that we can reduce students having less. It's one thing to go from sitting in a class full of 15 students to a class full of 22 students. That's one difference, but that's a lot different than suddenly I can't take a program of study, which is the career path that I want to pursue in life, right? So when I was looking at CTE programs today, there's only 3 that have a cap on 15 students. So this was actually one of the questions that was submitted through email, and I share it for the good of everyone. And again, the answers are published for everyone to see. 3 that have a maximum of 15 students, and that's for safety reasons. Automotive program is one of them, construction is one of them, and our foods, I believe, is our 3rd one. The other programs do not have a cap in terms of the number of students that are in them. So, and if you look in my published answers, you will see the percent, when you take out those CTE programs that have a limitation on the number of students that can be in there for safety reasons, and certification reasons, like credentialing reasons for the program, that still leaves 41% of, may I look at those ones I just handed to you? I want to make sure I'm quoting my own self properly. Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. It still leaves something like, here we go, yes. At Kent County High School, 42 right now, if you include those 3 programs, 42% of the classes have 15 or fewer students. When you take out those 3 programs of study and do the calculation, the resulting percentage is 41% are at 15 or fewer students, right? So even when you take those exceptions out, where we have to keep the classes that small, we're still looking at 41%. So what's that? 2 out of every 5 classes have 15 students or fewer. So I offer sincerely, as a classroom teacher can teach 25, 27 students. It can. You start going past 27, and especially if you pass 30, that gets really hard. And of course, the younger the student, the more important it is to have a smaller class size. Anyone who's been around 5-year-olds know, right? Many hands for many children, and the younger they are, the smaller the group size is really important. But when we're talking 16, 17-year-olds sitting in a room of 22 to 25 students, that's not an unreasonable experience.
I guess I always think that smaller class sizes are better. Maybe that's just how I feel about
Yeah,
it, but
yeah.
it's reassuring to know that having a class of 20 kids isn't gonna be the end of the world.
So so just to address that point, because you addressed it last week at the county commissioner, so I'd like the public to hear
Yes.
again what you said was the most important thing when you're talking about class size.
Right, there's a couple things that take it, and everyone, and I just want to say this, Ms. Swanson, everyone loves small class size, right? Even as a teacher, do I want 27 versus 18? I'll take the 18 day after day, right? Just because more people is more dynamic energy, which is part of why a smaller class size often emotionally feels more comfortable, if you will, right? But what we know from research, and this is well established in research, it's not like this is a new study, this is deeply established, optimal class size to support learning and achievement is really 18 to 22 people. Now, the bigger you get past 22, of course, you start to get a diminishing impact, right? But 25 is not a lot past 22, right? And again, the younger the children, the more you want to be in that 18 range. So I offer that as well-established research. The other thing is there's well-established research that indicates the most important thing for student achievement is the quality of instruction day in and day out. And while I certainly would never put our student member on the board, I think all of us as students in life who have attended schools, we had some classroom experiences that were extraordinary, right? And we had some classroom experiences that were less than extraordinary, right? And the quality of the instruction in our classroom is really what matters most. Is it rigorous? Is it actually challenging our students to meet the rigor of the standard and providing them the supports to get them there, right? As teachers, it's not my job. If you walk in my classroom on day 1 and you are performing at the next grade level, you don't need me. What you need me to do is to meet you where you are and push you to that next level, wherever that next level is, right? So that comes down to the rigor and the dynamic engagement in our classrooms, right? If we have classrooms where students are sitting there and the light in their eye is going out and their hand is on their, or my favorite, this one, right? That's needs to change, right? And so it's the quality of the instruction that matters most. And that really is our teacher capability, and that's why you always hear me say our people are our greatest asset, because they are the most influential thing. Second to the teacher and the quality of instruction in the classroom is the instructional leadership of our principals, right? Because principals are the ones who are in the school every day and can get into that classroom. They're the teacher, the principal who can come down that hallway and know what's happening in Mrs. McComas's class in room 218 day after day after day after day. And if students, the light is going out in their eyes, that principal is the one who needs to have that professional conversation. Or likewise, if that's the classroom where it doesn't matter who the learner is, they're going to do great things because that teacher really understands the robustness of rigorous instruction and engagement, then that principal's going to know that too, right? So they're the important factors when it comes to achievement, and I know none of us want to do less for our students. And I know I've said in different conversations, we have less money to do better with, right? Because the goal isn't to do the same, the goal is to do better than we're doing today. So, no easy task, but I believe we will figure it out. Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a bit of a separate question. It's more technical, just because of how tight things are. When I look at this beautiful color printing, had you considered at all just going to straight black and white? I
Sure, we
mean,
can do that.
And I just, I think I don't know if schools do mostly black and white or not, or.
I think we do. We try to make certain things a little bit more stand out for engagement purposes, but sure, that's not a problem.
Yeah, just because it is tight.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
it just seems to be necessary to kind of do things at that level.
Yeah.
Eesh. Well, let me ask this then, since we're talking about money. Have we thought about, and this is towards athletics and band, I saw it was a $10,000 increase. Because we're declining with students, and we have a lot, I don't want to misquote how many sports we have, but I know we have a lot of sports. And sometimes these sports don't fill both JV and varsity, or if they fill, then they have low team members, if that's to speak on that. So for that, what's the increase coming from? And while you answer that, have we thought about cutting some of our sports to kind of save money?
So again, I have not looked at reducing athletic programs because I'm trying to minimize taking things away from student experience. And Ms. Stewart, I'm looking really quickly, if you could help me. I think the increase deals with uniforms, or is that band?
It's,
What page are you referencing?
it's page 14,
Page
and it's
14.
athletic supplies and uniforms.
Yeah, so every year, there's reconditioning. This is a function of actually putting the money where we actually spend it. So, for example, football helmets need to be reconditioned, lacrosse helmets need to be reconditioned for safety purposes, uniforms need to be replenished. What I've been working throughout the year for is to ask the different programs to establish a multi-year cycle. So if we, I'm just using numbers to make the example. If we have 10 athletic programs, well, I'm not going to be able to afford to replace uniforms every year for all 10 teams, right? So we put people on a schedule of replenishment, right? So these teams will go in year 1, these teams will go in year 2, and so on. There are some maintenance things with athletics that need to be done annually, for example, the
Right.
helmet safety conditioning. So this is really a function of putting money where we're spending it there anyway.
And I understand your point about not wanting to take services or programs from students, but would it be justified if I don't know what sport, but let's just say a sport, was taken out to secure maybe another position or another wraparound service? Wouldn't that be justified?
Well, I think it depends, to be honest. Again, when I look at class size of 15, we have room to tighten there without reducing services to students. I would not disagree, though, that it's worth maybe a longer-term analysis around athletics and extracurricular programs, because the other thing that I did not, and Ms. Stewart, you'll keep me honest here, I don't recall in the many budget conversations and work sessions we have, extra duty pay, we did not reduce that. So extra duty pay is the pay that we use.
It's increased a little bit.
And that's really inflationary function.
Right.
Analyzing what are those extra duty dollars used for, and to your point around economizing, if we need to stand down an athletic team, I think that's something that, again, that's not a decision I would make lightheartedly.
Yeah, of course.
And again, when we think about, we may need to reduce more next year and the year after, that's where I can have deeper analyses to say, my hope this year was to minimize impact on program, right? Because our fundamental problem is the recurring cost. And so we have to fundamentally address, the root cause of it is the recurring cost of personnel. After that, it really starts to become reduction in programs and experiences for students. So I was trying to hold that
No, I just want
steady.
to ask for logic.
I have a question for Mrs. McGee. You're around sports all the time.
Yeah.
Do you see any of the?
So a couple of things. We field just about every sport that there's possible to field. We currently now have only one junior varsity team of all of our sports, and that's junior varsity boys basketball. And basketball, you only need 5 or 6 kids, whereas a lot of the team sports, you need 11. Look at the wrestling team. They're 14 weight classes, and we routinely filled only about 8 this year. You look at the smaller schools that we compete against, St. Michael's, Colonel Richardson, Mardella, Pocomoke, Snow Hill. They don't field, for example, they don't field football teams. You know, St. Michael's has soccer, but no football, because they don't have enough kids. So I understand Dr. McComas's point about not wanting to take anything away, but the trade-off is that our teams hardly have any substitutes. And one of the exceptions is North Dorchester just added lacrosse this year, but for both boys and girls, and they're probably a bigger school than we are. Can I make a comment about I understand that, I want to go back to the comments that have been made about Blueprint and also the comments about we can only control what we can control. Right now, Blueprint's the law. We can't do anything about that. And obviously.
We do have the ability to communicate, though,
I know.
what is working and what isn't working.
I know.
About the law.
Can I finish my thought?
Sure, but, yeah.
So that, and there are a lot of costs built into the implementation of the Blueprint. For example, the starting salary of $60,000 and all that. But one of the points that I think that you have made over and over again is that the biggest driver to why we're in the position we're in is we've lost 200 and some students, and we didn't address it, and I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, we didn't address it over the last 5 years because we had $15 million in emergency funding, and I think your words were we would have innately have been addressing that if we hadn't. So Blueprint is a problem, but it's not the only reason we're in this particular situation. We would still be in this situation even if there wasn't a Blueprint, wouldn't we? I mean, how do you address losing?
No, you wouldn't. You would not have been in this situation if you didn't have Blueprint. I'm sorry, Trish.
No, I just want to go back to something Dr. McComas said. So we lost 200 and some students over the last 5 years. I'm going by memory, okay? And let's say all of those 200 students didn't need any special services. They weren't special ed, they didn't receive special ed services, they weren't low income, they weren't speaking English as a second language. Just they got the basic stuff. That was $3 million that we've lost. That's more than we would need to balance this budget, right?
That is
So, I
correct.
mean, I'm not, hey, I'd love to be able to blame anybody, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to be balanced in our approach here.
Right.
So,
I would offer, again, I know Ms. McKenzie and Ms. McGee's point, advocacy is a function that we have, regardless of.
and we're not alone, everybody's in the same boat.
Correct.
Yeah, and
correct,
I don't mean
right,
to interrupt, but
right.
it's just that, as with any law, it is the law, and we will always be compliant with that, and that there's no doubt about that. At the same time, laws change because people advocate.
Right.
When things work and when they don't work. And I am wholeheartedly behind the pillars. I really do believe, I think they're excellent
Well, who
pillars.
doesn't want it,
But
the great, the
implementation,
best-
right?
the best
Implementation is not always what is beneficial, and so how do we keep what is good, but yet say, hey, this is not what's working for Kent, and that's the conversation that we've got to keep having as a board, and being able to say, this is what's working, thank you, we appreciate this, but here's this other piece that's really making the job harder. And we can't be afraid to say that and just say, well, it's law, it's law. Well, laws change because people advocate for it to change.
Right.
And implementation change because people advocate for it to change. And we cannot hesitate to speak up about that and be that squeaky wheel that says, this is what's working and this is what's good, but this is not serving our students. We cannot back down from that. We are a board, we do have a voice, and we need to speak up for Kent, period.
I believe totally what you're saying. What I do want to say to Mrs. McGee's point is that we didn't have the Blueprint a couple of years ago. We didn't have to put any money into it. It kept going. We didn't have to fund it. As of now, it's really coming home. We're going to have to come up with a lot of money. And it was passed through a legislature with no funding. And I agree. I think the Blueprint's wonderful. I just think, how are we going to just raise taxes in Kent County so much that we can't even, more people are gonna leave Kent County. It's a tough call.
Well, I
And
just
wanna
wanted
do-
to.
no, hold on a second.
Okay.
I want to do.
We're not disagreeing with each other.
No, I know that, but I think there's more to it than, the blueprint is coming now to hit us really hard, whereas 2 years ago, as you pointed out, we had all that money from COVID, and you pointed out that we just sort of overlooked it because.
I'm not saying we
didn't have to
overlooked
come-
it, but it was a cushion that we,
You had the resource, so you used it.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
So,
yeah.
but I agree with you, but now, I mean, we're gonna have to come up with a lot of money. Taxes already went up in Kent County, and they're gonna go up more. That's the only way that our funders
Well,
can do this.
So as Mr. Porter has said at more than one public presentation that I've gone to, which will support something Mr. Queen just recently said, raising taxes is only one way to bring in money. Economic development is another, and we don't have that, 200 and some people aren't going to move here if they don't have a job and don't have a place to live.
And I agree with you, but that's going to take time. We can't force it to happen. We need a radical change in this county. And I agree with you 100%. We need housing, we need jobs, but I don't see it happening anytime soon.
I agree with everything everyone's saying. I think we're splitting hairs on the ultimate decision we kind of already know. 36 to 44 positions will be lost. So a couple of points. It is a difference between funding with the blueprint and funding without. It's state law, but we'll do a lot better without the blueprint. And I'm an advocate.
I don't disagree.
And I'm an advocate for the blueprint, the intent of it. I publicly spoke out, I'm for a lot of the pillars and a lot of the things for it. But on this side of the table, you have to do the numbers. And the numbers just doesn't work with the blueprint right now. I also agree with Laura about how we can advocate. One of the things, I'll say this, one of the things, and it's because I just think numbers could be higher, like the community conversations or the proactive letters writing towards, yes, it was great, but I feel like our county can do so much better than the landmarks and the numbers we have. And it's going to take a team effort, which doesn't really fall on us until moving forward. But the big thing, and I'm going to say it publicly, it's been negligence. We had a 5-year cushion to just address and pay attention to this and be in a position to not weather the storm as hard as we're about to, but it's been negligence to a point where I'm starting to look at old budget meetings and compare to what the new superintendent is doing, and I'll say this publicly, based on what you're doing and what I read in the past, this is very transparent, and it also helps me as a board member to hold you accountable. I think personally you've done a great job. I don't know all the numbers. It's still confusing. I'm still learning. I'm still asking questions. But you've made it in a way that's very, very transparent for all to see exactly where we are. Like I was going to ask you, what was your experience with, I know you're a new-time superintendent, but did you have experience in handling a budget? And then also, what was your cause for doing town hall meetings and actually answer questions to the degree and detail that you have? Personally, Trish, you might know better than me. I haven't seen that done in this school system since I've been in Kent County. So on your part, I think that's a very, very good job to lead us to where we're going. I think after we make the tough decision, the real work for the people sitting up here will come after whatever decision we make next week. And that's where the real work and the real teamwork that a lot of us talked about in the retreat will need to happen, because we can't move forward just as a school system. It's going to take community partners. That's not just holding county commissioners accountable, but our state delegation. They can do a lot more than what I've seen in the last 2 years. And it's going to come a time, to Alden's point, when we let rid of however many people go, we're going to let go. The brunt of the anger is coming towards us. We need to have something in place to show our community we're transparent, we're accountable, but we're very proactive, and we're not waiting for these things to happen. That's not how you build resilience, waiting for negative outcomes and praying someone throws us an olive branch. It doesn't show leadership, and I'm not saying us in general. This is just, I'm not saying us in particular, but I'm speaking in general for public consumption, so to speak. It shows poor leadership when we sit back and do that. So I think after we make our vote, a lot of proactive, innovative, out-the-box thinking that a lot of us are calling for can come from the people sitting here, and I think that's how we need to move forward. Because in my opinion, the budget is pretty much done in my head. 36 to 44 positions will be gone. And that decision is really based on the county commissioners. For me personally, going into our contingency fund is not an option. I'm not even entertaining that. I'm saying that now, so if we ever got to a vote, you already know how John Queen is voting. But to sit around and wait for the commissioners to give us 800,000, it's a bigger component that the community that's watching or is not watching need to start holding county commissioners accountable for the things we need: healthcare, affordable housing, public transportation. In order for people to love our school system, they have to love our community first. So I see it's a lot of things where it's a big issue. I'll just say that.
It's complex, and Ms. McGee, I don't know if you were about to say something, Mr.
No,
Richards.
I wanted to give her credit for the town. I want to answer Mr. Queen's thing. Dr. McComas deserves 100% of the credit for the town hall, because when we met on April 14th, we didn't know there was going to be a town hall. So,
It's because I recognize a couple of things. I do have, while you're right, this is the first time I've held the title of superintendent. I do have extensive leadership experience in multiple school systems and 10 years as an Army officer. So I've run and managed many budgets. I have gone through, in other school systems I've worked for, we were hitting the fiscal cliff related to COVID funds sooner, and had to routinely eliminate 30, 45. I know in a 3-year cycle, I eliminate 110 positions from just my department. So I do have experience, despite not having this being the first time with this title. And I wanted to do the town hall meeting because as it became more and more evident to me that there was no way to reconcile this budget without a significant impact to our personnel. You know, no one worries if you trim a little bit from the color printer, right? Like, no one's like, you're cutting the color copies, right? You know, they do get upset if you don't have paper and you need it for teaching. They do that. But no one's going to get upset when you trim the non-personnel things, right? But again, our school system has trimmed $1.2 million from non-personnel in the last 24 months. There's not any, like, we're in the bone area, right? The flesh, the muscle, all that's gone. And so there is no way to reconcile this. So as that became more and more clear that there was no other path, that's when I was like, I believe in being personally accountable to people, and that is why the town halls, that's why the community conversations, because I just hold myself to that level of accountability. If I'm going to lead, then I need to be present and available to answer questions. And these kinds of formats, as you know, the board format is a very strict protocol, and I think that leaves community members sometimes feeling unaddressed, right? Because they can say what they need to say, but they don't walk away with
It's not
one,
a
feeling
dialogue.
heard, right, and two, greater understanding. You know, I'm a teacher first and foremost. Every conversation I have is about helping people understand, learn, and think more than they did before I talk with them. So, thank you.
I just appreciate your support of the blueprint. You're passionate, Laura. What you said about that is what we all need to follow if we can make it work. Your passion is just unbelievable. Dr. McComas, on this town hall you're doing, are you going to, something like when you see them on TV, are you going to be sitting there walking around and talking to people, or how does that, is it going to be right in here?
It's going to be right in here.
You're gonna be at
My goal is to be not sitting here, but to be down on the floor, and anyone who's present, I can be proximal to. We will also, Mr. Poor will be helping me manage questions that come in through the virtual format.
So if we want a show, we can sit in the back and watch, correct?
Well, right,
We don't want to see it.
yeah, I would prefer you not come in person, not because I don't want you here, but I just want to avoid violating the Open Meetings
get it.
Act,
I get it.
because the budget is a direct you know, a lot of times I have meetings and they're not a function directly of the board, but the budget is one of your direct functions, and I just don't want to inadvertently compromise anybody with the Open Meetings Act. But you are welcome to watch, and you can send in questions through the virtual
That's great. I'm
line.
glad you're
Okay.
doing this. That's a really exciting thing.
I just hope the community receives it well. Well, the
I hope
effort.
they take the opportunity.
Yes, well, and that's another thing with our community, like, a lot of us want a great school system here in this county, but you don't really see the community galvanize around the school system unless there's a big tragedy like the bus, for instance, or maybe the things coming out of COVID. For us to move forward as a community, we also need the families in the community to be proactive in engaging the board and coming to meetings. Now, I've been here 6 months. Unless we're giving out awards, it's bare minimum here. More people have been watching online than in the past. I pay attention to those numbers as well, but I still feel like it's not an onus on us, but I'll say we as a school system, I still think we're missing a connection point with our community somewhere where the engagement hasn't been surplus, so to speak. So I think there's still things we're missing, because if I was I don't want to lowball and guess, but it's going to be probably 10 or less people for the town hall meeting.
Right, right.
Hopefully more, hopefully
Right, well, you mean they're not
Hopefully
coming out to
less.
spend time with me? I hurt my feelings. No, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Queen, and here's what I would say is the case I've experienced elsewhere, in fact, everywhere. Families are busy, and I'm not making excuses, but what I would say is, you know, it's too easy to interpret people not showing up as people not caring and not engaging. I think caring and engagement shows up in many, many different ways.
I would agree.
And, you know, if you're working parents, both parents are working, or a single parent, right, it might be all you can do every day is to get up, get everybody where they need to be on time, you know, get home, get food on the table, homework, you know, you're doing your homework in bed and up and do it again the next day. It doesn't mean parents don't care. It doesn't mean they're not engaged. Engagement might look like I'm seeing what my children's homework is. It might mean looking on Schoology to see how their grades are. It might mean reading the newsletter that the teacher sent home. So I just offer for us to take, I agree with you, we can never do enough to engage families. And I would agree with you, we can never do enough to figure out how to engage them on their terms, right? And I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah.
But I just want to caution that we don't, in one swoop, say people aren't engaged. I think engagement shows up in a lot of different ways. The letter writing was a great example. Community conversations. I mean, we had some families who came to every single community conversation, to the point that I was like, wow, but thank you for showing up 5 times when you could have shown up once. So, but then we had others who didn't show up at all, even though they had 5 opportunities and never once came. So I just offer that because I never want to send the message that we are
Belittle
putting.
in the
Yes,
community. No, I got
amen.
you. Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, excuse me. Yes.
I agree with you, though.
Yeah,
Those
thank you.
community they were great. Went to a lot of those. They were very well done.
Yeah.
So let me ask this. What's next for us? Because I know we're voting next Monday.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So what will happen next is I will have our town hall meeting on Thursday to try to answer any remaining questions. Any additional
And that's at
questions?
6, correct?
Mr. DeVillier, what time's our town hall? 6, thank you. They're the kind of little things that I will mess up. So Thursday, town hall meeting. Monday, I will bring forward a final budget proposal based on insights that we've gained between our last meeting and next Monday. You'll be able to answer, I'll answer whatever questions you have at that time. And if we're able and ready to finalize a budget next week, then we will. Ideally, that would keep me on schedule with going to the commissioners the next day. I do know that, it's helpful to them in terms of figuring out the whole county finances, because we are a big chunk of their budget. So I'd like to go May 6th if possible.
Have you gotten any feedback on the additional 800,000 you would?
No, I
Okay.
have not. So what do I need the board to do between now and next Monday? I need you to the extent that you can listen on the town hall meeting, just so that you can hear anything that I'm hearing. I would ask that you look over the budget questions that were submitted and look at the responses. I think you'll hear a lot of what I've said in meetings come through on the written responses. think about that contingency fund. I know you may already have your mind made up
I
around. So that's something for us to consider, and then,
Well, we'd have to change policy, and that would take a couple of months.
there you go. So, and so.
Not that we
you know,
can't do it, I'm just saying, even if it was on the agenda for Monday.
It wouldn't affect
it
this
would-
decision.
Yeah, it wouldn't affect this year because it would be for just discussion one month and a vote the following month.
Am I hearing you correctly? We're going to vote on this next
Monday.
Monday. Will we know of the staff reductions and all that then?
Yeah, I will definitely bring you an update. I will tell you right now of the, 36 to 44, 43 positions, I'm feeling fairly optimistic around attrition. So when I use the term attrition, I'm talking about people who are taking us up on the retirement incentive. That's part of the attrition group. Vacancies, not filling vacancies that we have unfilled in the current FTE cycle. People who are perhaps non-tenured teachers who we are not renewing their contract. And then, if somebody moves for some reason. So all those, there's a multitude of things that go into attrition. Right now, I'm looking at about 26 positions that we can handle out of the 36, 43. So 26 right now can be
And that's-
addressed through these attrition processes. That makes sense.
Two questions related to personnel, which is the biggest ticket item. Just to put it out there, we're still in negotiations with all three
That's correct.
bargaining units, so maybe they're placeholders in the budget for what that's going to cost us, correct?
Correct.
And, Shazam, the other one was, in terms of, we get to the point where we're still going to make the difficult decision of someone losing their, making a decision for somebody that they weren't able to make for themselves. And I don't know how I would define equity, but and you have said, you wouldn't take it all from one school, but I'm hoping there's some sort of, whatever equity looks like, fairness
Right.
in how that happens.
Right, and I will say, I was just as recent as this morning, re-looking at student enrollment by school, by grade level. I think equity is always anchored in need, right? It's anchored in need. So different places have different needs. And so that's really how that equity piece comes in. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's looking very deliberately, analyzing the data related to student enrollment, data related to class size, data related to content area, data related to positions outside of classroom positions, right? This is, again, something that is far-reaching for the entire organization. So there's virtually no aspect of our organization, particularly if we close the entire 800,000 gap with positions, there's no part of this organization that will not be impacted by personnel reduction. Some of that reduction, this is again part of, I explained this earlier, but just to reiterate, where we can utilize grant funds, we will use grant funds. So it could be something like it doesn't look like you've lost the position because you've been able to move that to a grant fund, a recurring grant fund. But the operating budget is reduced in that way, so.
I've been asked this question a couple times, and I don't know the percentages, but they say, well, if all the teachers are going, or is anything going to come out of the the administration? And I don't know how to answer that. I just say, I hope that,
Yeah.
because they say the more teachers you lose, and that's, but then the admin, you need all them too, so I don't know how that,
Yeah, I am looking at reducing central administration, and that's again an example of where you look at grants that you can, because you still need the manpower, just like where we can use grants for teaching positions, the concentration of poverty is an example, the MSDE literacy grants an example, title funds.
Question about the budget, because I'm still we're really here because of lack of students or losing students over the last 5
Right.
years, so.
Right.
Go ahead.
And sorry to interrupt, but that, I wanted to come back, and while I won't, I'm not here to debate Blueprint, what I will
And I
say
wasn't
is.
either, but I'm just saying that that's a very real reality.
Right, and what I would offer is regardless of whatever funding model you have, right? Like, whether it's, I think the trick with Blueprint is because it has all these strings attached.
Yeah.
Right? That's the challenge with that model. All these must-dos and strings attached to it. But even if you didn't have that model, any school system anywhere, when you lose 224 students, that's going to impact your bottom line.
Especially when you're talking economy of scale on a system that's as small as ours to start with.
Correct. So, I mean, even if we were a private school and charge tuition, you lose 224 students, your revenue is down by whatever amount of money you charge for the tuition. So I just offer that for everyone's consideration as well, because to Mr. Queen's point earlier, this is complex. It is complex, and it's way too easy for all of us to go to simple things that we want to point to. But no matter what, when student enrollment goes down, funding goes down. And because our economy of scale is so restricted here by population, we can't absorb that, right? So, thank you, Mr. Queens.
And that was our attempt to go for the bills forward in Annapolis to kind of get that share, change
Yes,
from
sir.
a 50-50 to something different.
Yes, sir.
Which, by the way, we didn't get. Question about the budget. So I'm basing a lot of my line items that I highlight or might save for next week to really come with the questions. I base a lot of what I'm thinking about students being decreased. So when I look at something, and this is highlighted on my list, I was gonna ask next week, when you're looking at the food, cafe managers, cafe workers, and it's an increase in that, if we have less kids, why do we need more? Now, maybe it's going to other things, as you were saying earlier, but, so something like that is, I'm gonna ask next week, well, where's this extra money going if we have less kids? We should have less food, we should have less staff.
And I'm going to ask my partner, Ms. Stewart, who oversees food service, and I would offer, Mr. Queen, the sooner you give me your questions,
say, if you got
it's
questions-
really.
It's a lot, though, but
I'll be honest, it is, I always use that expression, it is much better for me and the team to be able to answer those questions thoughtfully as opposed to like on the fly, and then I can share them with the public.
Yeah.
Right? So I just offer that if you could, the sooner you send them to me, the more grateful I am for everyone's sake.
I think it's best
And
for
I'll-
the board too, so that, we're not getting all the answers on Monday, and then you're saying, okay, we're voting now.
No, I agree, but
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
not an in-detail question that's gonna change how I vote.
I got you.
You know what I mean?
I
But-
got you. I just want to make
Yeah,
sure
no.
I'm as transparent as we can be.
Of course.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your patience.
So food service is essentially federally funded, so you can look at food service as a grant. It is separate from current expense. Food service is supposed to be essentially self-sufficient. So when you're looking at food service, yes, the enrollment may go down, and yeah, we will have to look at it, but you have to look at it in the amount of meals that is provided. We get reimbursed for our breakfast program as well as the lunch. So for example, while there was a fund balance in COVID, they increased the amount of reimbursement that we would get. According to our audit, there's a certain amount of fund balance that you are to have in food service, but it cannot be a lot. So that's something that we look at, and I work with my support supervisor of food service to look at the revenues, and when we look at the revenues as well as to our expenses, it has been self-sufficient. So yes, while that is true, you can't really look at a student enrollment, you have to look at the amount of meals that we are serving. And it is a great amount of meals that we are serving because all of our schools are CEP schools, which unfortunately is poverty. So the students there, it's a definite data shows that there's a need to feed our kids. And we're regularly monitoring that. I have talked to Dr. McComas and made her aware of that. That's why there's the a la carte sales with the smart snacks. That also helps us with our revenue. We have grants that came about for us to improve food service. So honestly, food service, where it is now with Kent County, thankfully it is self-sufficient and self-running. So there is no savings. The savings that we have incurred with food service, we have addressed that with the board. Prior to Dr. McCombs, I know Ms. Trish should be aware, and possibly Mr. Rose, we presented what we were using the fund balance for, which is we have done things to like upgrade the pots and pans. There were old pots and pans for 20 years. I mean, food service really, because there wasn't the extra money to do that. So we took the initiative to do that, add different equipment. We have walk-ins that we're going to be working on. I think Rock Hall, we did an update in the walk-in there. We're looking to do walk-ins to update Garnett as well as the warehouse. And any of the serving line, I know we had to do some work in that regard and some other equipment things that we were doing with food service, but that's kind of a self-sufficient. You have to look at the meals versus the students, and we're able to have more detail if that is appropriate.
I would just add that what is on our operating budget, and you'll correct me, is our personnel, right? The cost of our cafeteria workers. And then I would also offer, just think about your own grocery bill. Is the cost of food going down or going up, right? So even though our student population is going down, when you look at the volume of meals and normal inflationary cost, I mean, just think of what, I know, eggs. I was blown away at eggs a couple months ago, I know. So I just offer that for us to
I
consider.
don't want to assume, but like
Yep.
a quick, I'll say, okay, and then I'll go to my next line.
Yep,
Because
great.
some of this stuff I assume what I think is going on,
Right.
but I don't want to assume.
Right, now, and I don't want you to assume, because if you're thinking that and questioning that, someone else is also thinking that and questioning it. That's why it's important to me that whatever questions come in, we answer them thoroughly and thoughtfully, and that we publish them, right? Because, again, if you're thinking it, someone else is also looking and thinking the same thing. I know you'll see in the questions that I published, in 2 different submissions, people had 3 questions were kind of identical, right? And I was grateful, because that tells me people are looking at, but it also gives me the opportunity to explain, right? Like the example around the printers, which was interesting, right? Because we had a third stakeholder bring that up tonight. And that's an example of where it used to be buried over here, and I'm pulling it out and putting it where it actually is used.
Yeah.
But it looks like, oh my gosh, a huge increase, when
Yeah.
it's really putting the money where the monies are
Already,
used.
yeah.
And just to add for your to food service, the only thing that current expense is covering is the pension and healthcare. So everything else, food service is covering. And I will say, we have seen a drastic increase in the cost of food. And with the consortium, we explained this about a year ago, when we presented our food service budget. Well, we do that projection as well. The consortium that we're with, if we're going out, for example, the Cisco bid, well, there were food items that were on the list but not available. So now you have to go to another food item that actually costs more than what was actually, in that bid. So we are trying to stay on top of that. So that attributes. But food service, that is taken care of with the revenue that we get for that.
And Ms. Stewart, I don't know if you've been told this, but you've been doing a good job as well with Dr. McComas.
Yes.
It's very transparent. It's easy to ask questions from what I'm looking at in front of me.
Thank you, Mr. Queen, because Ms. Stewart, I could not do this work without Ms. Stewart and each of the team members that we have raked over the coals again and again, trying to squeeze more and more out of a rock here. So thank you for acknowledging her
And
important
one
work.
quick thing,
And I do want to add, because I think it's good to know, to Dr. McCombs' point, the question that came up about communications, you see the increase in mid-level because that's all the schools of 35,000. But if you go on page 29, it should be on page 29, in our fixed charges for communications, there's a decrease of 31,000.
So you
No, actually
see-
41,000 in communications, because we just shifted, because that's in mid-level, it's all schools. In our fixed charges, that is central office in the depot. So you'll see there's really a savings that was shifted.
Right. And that's an example of, like when I often get cost, people, because people love to say, you need less administration, right? And that's everywhere, remember we had the discussion, what's in administration? Well, it's not just Mary McComas, right? It is the printers for central office. It is all the things that take to
operation,
operationalize,
yeah.
right? So, for example, we were showing the expenses of the printing at the schools in the central office, right? Which makes the central office look more costly than in truth, that is an expense at managing the school building
Yeah.
itself. So that's an example. But thank you, and thank you. And I just have to call this out, did you see, she's like, on this page, there's this page, like, I mean, she knows this book inside and out, so.
All righty. Does anybody else have anything else?
One quick thing. I'm assuming next week will be your final presentation budget for us to vote on.
Yes.
Are we going to get that Wednesday of this week?
Yes, I think we need to do that because that's the open meetings requirement.
All right. I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure that.
So, well, okay.
Well, here's what, I mean, my intention is to do that,
Nothing has changed.
there's really not too much, I mean, as you know, there's not a lot of wiggle.
Yeah.
Our wiggle room is 8 additional positions, or the equivalent value of that, right? That's
I
really
mean,
it.
so I mean, I'm thinking process-wise, the only thing that's going to happen between now and next Monday is you're going to have the town hall. So
To answer
do you anticipate hearing anything? Do we anticipate hearing anything that's going to, because right now, this is your proposed budget. It is not our budget.
Right.
When we vote on it and adopt it, it becomes Kent County
Board
Public
budget,
Schools
yeah.
budget. So right now, you're the engineer of this train. Do you see yourself changing anything in the book that you've given us?
Good question, Trish.
Yeah.
No, I'm just trying to think what would change between now and next Monday
Right.
that you has to get something to us by Wednesday.
Yeah, what I anticipate adjusting between what I proposed a week ago to what I'll bring forward
Well,
next
this
week.
hasn't changed since you gave it to us 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right. But what I do anticipate changing is really the number of positions we're reducing.
So when will you have a clearer idea of that? You're
Well,
going
I
to be
can-
able to do it by Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so you said you have 26 positions that you know that you think are going to happen.
30,
That-
well, yeah.
You said 26. If we do go up to the maximum of 44, that means you have to come up with 10, like 8,
That's a
18
lot more.
more.
Mhm.
And will we know anything about that or not? I mean, when,
Yeah, I can, in that presentation, give you the array of positions, because again, that will touch every aspect of the organization.
it's scary.
The 26 is assumed, or it's not confirmed yet, correct?
The
Some of it
20,
is, and you're
some
pretty
of it
good
is
about that, yeah,
confirmed,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
I wouldn't be articulating 26 if I didn't
Okay,
feel like
okay,
that was
okay, okay.
solid.
All right.
Because I would never want to mislead any of us. The 26, I feel pretty solid around normal attrition, right? Where
Yeah.
people our personnel are making choices for themselves, right? But we will definitely get to a place where we are reducing positions that we are making that decision.
So, if I can ask about that, so if I'm understanding it correctly, the board has one employee, and that's you. Everybody else is your employee. I don't want to have the responsibility of deciding who loses their job and who doesn't.
No,
So
that's my
that's
job.
you, right?
That is my
I just
job.
need the whole board to understand.
Yes.
We don't micromanage and say, you're going to get rid of that IA there and all that. Okay, that's you.
That's my job,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah, we gotta let her get in the hot seat. That's
No,
all.
I know, I'm just saying, if anybody thinks that, well, there's somebody that might think that they've got all that power and that they can do that, I'm just saying, for better or worse, we don't have that power.
Well, and people in the community may think
Yeah,
you have that
yeah.
power, right? Like, all of you, I think, are, definitely have a sense of those roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
But sometimes community members think, they don't realize sort of the checks and balance system we have going here, right? Whereas it's, I bring forward this proposed budget, you're my check to that, to say,
Even
does that make
something-
sense?
Even
Or-
if something is simple, because I know one board member has had this experience already, and it probably will happen to all of us. Somebody we know who's a teacher will come up to us and say, I hope I don't lose my job. Well, we're putting it out there, guys.
Right, and even the superintendent hopes you don't lose your job. Right, that's the truth. It is truth. Our board members are not the ones who determine that. It is the role of the superintendent. And even the superintendent doesn't want you to lose your job. But,
Yeah. No,
but
nobody, yeah.
we definitely will be making difficult decisions. And so I will have all that package for you. Again, Thursday, unless, now I will preface this by saying, I will post our final budget on Wednesday. Barring some profound discovery Thursday at the town hall meeting, which I will let you know right away, somebody has donated, $1 billion to us for a one-time use. Barring something really profoundly unforeseen, I feel confident that what I'll be able to put forward on Wednesday will be something that you can stand on. It's a difficult decision for us as a whole community, but.
Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, a couple of things, I just want to remind,
With respect, Madam President, with all due respect, if I could, as past Director of Economic Development, and also past President of the Chamber of Commerce, I would like to answer some of the questions that came up this evening relative to economic development and accounting, which may be enlightening for everyone, school size, class size, and some other things. I know that I used my 3 minutes.
you get another, go ahead, I'll give you another 3.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Ms. Swanson, class size. I am the oldest person in this room by a lot. When I went to school, I had classes that had 54 students in them. And they were math classes. And everybody in this room sees how well I do math. So it's not the class size, as Superintendent McComas just pointed out, it's the teacher in front of the classroom that demands your attention and demands your respect and has discipline in the classroom.
Agreed.
That's one thing. The blueprint. You have to understand that the blueprint is a result of a worldwide trip that the Blueprint Commission, known as the Kirwan Commission, went on to look at countries and the best education systems throughout the world based upon countries. Japan, South Korea, Switzerland, Sweden, correct me if I'm wrong. We already have here in the state of Maryland exceptional schools. We didn't need to go to other countries to find that out. Take a look and look up blue ribbon schools in the state of Maryland. Correct me if I'm wrong. Blue ribbon schools are literally 4.0 schools in the state of Maryland. We didn't have to go to other countries to find out how to get good education. We could have emulated blue ribbon schools that are right here in the state. The taxpayers, your parents, taxpayers, footed the bill for that trip. What came back was an education program that the Blueprint Commission knew was unaffordable at the very beginning. It was $3.9 billion, billion with a B, that's a lot of zeros, per year for 10 years of implementation. Simple math. There are only 2,200,000 households in the state of Maryland. It would cost, on average, $18,000 per household to implement the blueprint. That's unaffordable in the state of Maryland. Economic development. That's not, economic development and businesses moving into Kent County actually starts at the state level, not the county level. You know that. We've already discussed that.
Yes.
If a state is not business friendly, that's the first thing that a business owner and decision-making manager looks at. Is the state friendly? Before you even decide on what county you're going to go to, you're going to decide if the state is friendly. I just got in my email in my inbox today that a ranking by, I think it was Forbes magazine, and Maryland is ranked 31st worst state to do business in. But there have been others, and on average, Maryland ranks the 40th worst state to do business in. In this particular ranking, North Carolina was 4th, South Carolina was 11th, Delaware surprisingly was 25th, which knocked me out, because they're usually in the top 10 for business. In order for Kent County to have economic development, the state has to become much more friendly on business than it is now. And I'm not just talking about corporate taxes. There's a whole slew of stuff that's going on. Right?
businesses getting
You had 338 increases in fees and taxes and creations of new ones last year. Right now, the count is 20, but now from our delegates, it's more like 50 more this year. Well, that all adds to the cost of living. Any business owner or decision-making manager, for all of you people that are listening, they're going to take a look at not only the cost of living, cost of putting a business in the state of Maryland, they're going to take a look at the cost of living for their employees. If you don't have the right numbers, business owners and decision-making managers are not going to look at your state.
Mr. Wall, can you, one more minute, wrap it up?
One minute. Community involvement. Let me hit that one. We've got 8,800, approximately 8,800 households in the state, in Kent County. We have 1,700 students, multiple children within one family. The average number of residents in a household is 2.07. That means that you have many more households without children in them, many more. My guesstimate is that we have 10% of our households that have kids in school, 90% do not. And if you're wondering why there's not more involvement in households, because they don't have any skin in the game. I do. I don't have any kids. I could be everybody's great-grandfather, for crying out loud. I don't have any skin in the game. But I am interested in providing an education, and the ideology of the blueprint, I am all for. I want our kids to be globally competitive, not just state competitive or county competitive. They've got to be global competitive in this economy. So yes, we have to educate our kids to be globally competitive. I'm not all in yes, but at a cost factor that is affordable for the taxpayers in Kent County. If you're looking at a doubling of your tax bill, well, okay then. The average median household, the price of a house here in Kent County is somewhere between $300,000 and $350,000. Real estate taxes are somewhere between $3,000 and $3,600. In order to implement the blueprint, you've got to double that. So instead of putting $300 away per month, if you're budgeting for your real estate taxes, you're going to have to put $600 to $750 a month away to pay for just Kerwin.
Okay.
That's crazy, and I'm done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you, Mr.
Is there anything
Wall.
else anybody has to say? I just want to remind everybody that Dr. McComas will be having a town hall on Thursday, May 1st at 6 o'clock. There's information on the Kent County Public Schools website about how you can link in and get your Google invite and all that. The next meeting of the Kent County Board of Education is Monday, May 5th. It's a special meeting where the only agenda item will be hopefully adopting the budget. That will begin at 5:30. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Ms. McKenzie made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Rhodes seconded. Is there any questions, comments? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, you're